Director of Learning and Engagement at the Asheville Art Museum, and we are very delighted that you were here tonight for a program featuring special guest, Ann Shafer. Ann Shafer is an independent curator specializing in contemporary prints and printmaking. Formerly, Ann was a curator at the Baltimore Museum of Art and the National Gallery of Art. She is creator and host of the podcast Platemark and organizer of the Baltimore Fine Art Print Fair. She has a BA from the College of Wooster and an MA from Williams College, both in art history. Tonight, Ann will discuss artist Stanley William Hayter and the seminal printmaking workshop he founded in Paris called Atelier 17. The studio focused on experimental intaglio printmaking and attracted many of Paris's most avant-garde artists. Hayter moved the studio to New York during World War II and returned it to Paris in 1950. It became a meeting place for European emigres and New York School artists who worked side by side discovering new ways of making. Following the presentation, time will be reserved for Q&A with Ann, and we hope you'll take some time after the program to go upstairs to the third floor to visit the exhibition American Art of the Atomic Age, which includes prints by Stanley William Hayter and artists from Atelier 17. I would like to acknowledge Bob Benitez for his generous support of this program. Thank you, Bob. And thank you again for attending tonight's talk, and please join me in extending a happy and warm welcome to Ann Shafer. Well, hello, familiar faces. Why did you sit in the front, Phil? God. Before I start anything, thank you all for having me here. It's my first time to Asheville. It's beautiful and lovely, and thanks to Bob and his beautiful husband, Michael, for having us and being such wonderful hosts. So thank you. On the table over there are some Platemark stickers and Platemark pencils. I hope you will grab them on your way out and spread the word about the pod, because we need more listeners. Okay. This was 2001, and they had this show. This is an installation shot from it. And their PR noted that vital forms are shapes inspired by nature. Innovative artists and designers used them in the 40s and 50s to evoke living entities ranging from amoebas and plant life to the human figure. This is where it gets good. The exhibition features paintings, sculpture, photography, architecture, ceramics, fashion, and graphic and industrial design. What's missing? We got pretty people in the audience. Okay, so let's face it. The artists are privileges, painting and sculpture. We all know that. And it's in vogue these days to relook at people who are late career or even mid-career, artists of color, women. Nobody's paying attention to prints. It makes me nuts. Printmaking is so kept to the side, but the truth is that many artists use it as a way to inform the work that they make in other techniques and mediums. So it's always been my hope to insert or maybe reinsert printmaking into the canon. You can help me. Because the exhibition weighs heavily on prints from the Atelier 17, I'm going to talk about the workshop and explain how it worked and what was on there. I'm going to talk about Hayter, because he's my guy. And then I'm going to have a couple of artists following him who work with him, obviously, and who are represented upstairs to give you just a little taste of some other things they do. In the tumultuous period of the 40s and 50s, the world was profoundly shaped by the aftermath of World War II and the onset of the Cold War, which is exactly the time that the exhibition looks at. And one of the most notable themes in art during this period was the exploration of the existential dread and anxiety brought on by the atomic age. I don't know if you remember stop, drop, and roll, or tuck under the desks, or I had nightmares for years. Artists grappled with the unprecedented destructive power of nuclear weapons and the looming threat of nuclear war. This existential angst found expression in various art forms, from the stark apocalyptic landscapes of the abstract expressionists to the haunting imagery of the surrealists. And surrealism was a primary goal and focus at the Atelier 17, so we're going to talk a bit about it. There's Hayter. Atelier 17 was a printmaking workshop whose history spans pre- and post-World War II, encompassing surrealism and modernism, all the way through abstract expressionism, and even beyond. The studio exists today in Paris. Hayter died in '88, so it was taken over by another person. From its beginnings in 1927 in Paris, when the studio attracted surrealist artists and many others, Atelier 17 welcomed anybody interested in exploring the possibilities inherent in printmaking. Calder, Miro, Kandinsky, Masson, Picasso, just a few of the names of myriad artists who came and were associated with the Atelier in pre-war Paris. Now, Hayter, the story is inextricably linked with him. He was the founder. He was a man of apparently legendary dynamism. I mean, there's a film of him upstairs. I don't know if you've watched it. I don't think he's at his charismatic best in the film, but you get a sense of him. The writer Anais Nin described Hayter as a, quote, a stretched bow or a coiled spring, every minute witty, swift, ebullient, sarcastic. He was trained as a chemist and a geologist, and he was a polymath. He was interested in everything. His art was informed by mathematics, Jungian psychology. He was really into Jungian psychology, and the natural world. He also wrote a lot. His writings expound on technique, but also from meanings that can arise from using particular tools and approaches. And for Hayter, the tools and materials you used, whether in copper or canvas, were not simply a means to an end, but he really believed that you could discover things about yourself, about humanity, through this action. And while his books and technical innovations have ensured his reputation as a master of his craft, people always refer to him as a wizard, a technical wizard. Less attention is paid to his art and what he was trying to say in it. And for him, he really believed in this intersection of the technique and the meaning, that they should curl around to each other like a Mobius strip, one informing the other, and on and on. His legacy is felt across an international art scene, and its influence should not be underestimated. This is a list of all of the locations of the studio. You can see that it moved a lot. It started in Paris in 1927, and it moved to New York was opened in New York in 1940. He left Paris the day that the French declared war against Germany in 1939, September. And he spent that next year, he taught in San Francisco for a bit over the summer, and then finally by the fall of 1940, he opened up the Atelier 17 again at the New School for Social Research. I love looking at this list because, A, imagine moving to presses. And I was told by Mrs. Hayter, Desiree, who's lovely, that in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, all of these subsequent moves after they came back to Paris were due to landlords and neighbors being unhappy with the international range of artists coming and going at all hours of the night and day. As she sort of winked at me and said, read between the lines. The studio was named, though, after 17 Rue Campagne Première, which was the third location, which always seemed to me to indicate that Hayter didn't mean to do what happened. He wasn't starting a workshop in order to become a world-famous, incredibly seminal workshop. He was just helping people understand prints and printmaking and helping them learn how to do it. And I find that fascinating. I mean, he wasn't reluctant, and I think he loved being in the limelight. But he would never admit to being the master teacher sort of person in the studio. He felt that they were colleagues. From the beginning until even today, the Atelier operates rather informally with an open door policy and an atmosphere of collaboration due mainly to Hayter's generosity of time, energy, knowledge, and equipment. And it was his goal to bring like-minded people together to work toward new ways of expressing ideas and images. He believed that more could be discovered with more people. And I think anyone in this room who works in a print shop knows more brains are better than fewer brains, right? Oh, look at you go. Prints by Hayter and his associates are conceptually full and passionately full of ideas about the human condition and dreams, mythology, war, natural phenomena. And the Atelier really was a new model for this kind of place. It ran totally counter to the traditional Atelier model where I would show up with maybe a drawing and the person who took it from me would execute it for me, make the addition. That's not what happened here. You were taught to go from idea to pen and paper or pencil, whatever you were using, making a plate, printing it, and cleaning up after. The exceptional rigor of subject matter in images of all of the Atelier 17 artists was achieved by 3 technical innovations that I think should be noted. Many of you probably know all this, but you're going to have to listen. First, Hayter revived the art of engraving, which he believed was uniquely suited to address issues of modern art. Now, I've never read anywhere where he explained why and how, but he always said that, and I find it so curious. And I think in the end, he was one of those people who had such a great facility with engraving that it could lead to his subconscious, doodling basically, and produce these wonderful works of art. I think he was unusual. Historically, engraving had been used to reproduce more famous works of art for a large market, like the Mona Lisa on the left. I wish I had a close, I couldn't find a good image of it. But if you go close up, it's one of those engravings with the dot and lozenge, and it looks like a photograph, but it's actually an engraved work. Second, Hayter and others pioneered the use of textiles and paper, string, wood, other materials pressed into a soft, round, coated plate to gain an amazing variety of textures. So formerly, you might use pantyhose or netting that would approximate aqua tint, but they pushed it forward using lace and even creating images with lace, as you see on the right there. So that's a piece of a lace collar that belonged to her mother, making the net of the hen. Whereas, of course, the poet is using aqua tint as the tone behind it, the donkey. And then third, Hayter and his colleagues developed several inventive methods of printing in colors from a single plate, eliminating the need to print a separate plate for each color. So the one on the left, the decor, is 4 plates. It's an early CMYK, essentially, print. And on the right, you see Shulin is holding an inked up plate of one of Hayter's plates with, I think, 7 colors. This was an important thing. And I just wanted to, there was a great example of various ways you can add color to your plate at the Baltimore Museum. This is Moreau, too, of the same plate, obviously. And on the left, he's rolling orange across the top, very simple. And on the right, he's adding these little splotches of color with his thumb. All of these are counterintuitive, these 3 techniques. It's counterintuitive to most of us who love and look at Atelier prints. So while you're looking at Atelier 17 artists and their works, know that when you're seeing etching, it probably is engraving, especially early on. When you think you're seeing aqua tint, it's probably soft ground etching. And when you see a color print, it's the result of not a separate plate for each color, but of one single pass with press with multiple colors. And maybe because of how incredible these technical achievements were, scholarship on Atelier 17 always focuses on those and the technical, and it misses the content. Hayter was super eloquent, he wrote a lot, and he said about the content in art, its purpose is to lead man to a fuller understanding of his terms of existence. So he was really pushing this idea of content, and people just ignore it. It's bizarre. Now, the workshop, as I said, was run like a cooperative. You didn't just show up with your plate and say, make my thing. You were expected to do everything. And it was this really collaborative and group scene. When you see pictures of artists working there, there's like 6 people sitting around the table, and you could be sitting there next to one your brother, for instance, and you could say, hey, Juan, I have a question. What do you think of this? And he would turn to you and say, I don't know how to print this. You would just exchange ideas. It was crazy. Hayter exhibited with the Surrealists. He's identified with them. He exhibited with them in 1933. He was not a card-carrying member. He and Breton had a split over something stupid, because Breton apparently was. They were interested, the Surrealists were interested in the internal life of the mind. But, as we know, in the 30s in Europe, the threats of fascism and war were rolling across the continent. And at the Atelier, as everywhere, the Spanish Civil War galvanized artists into political action. The workshop published 2 portfolios for the benefit of Spanish refugee children, Solidarity, 1938, and Fraternity, 1939. Hayter took a position with the Office International pour la France, coordinating donations from artists. He made a clandestine trip over the border into Spain. Don't know why, don't know what happened. I haven't found anything that will tell us any of that. It's lost to time, sadly. And there is a great anecdote to be found in Anna Snyn's diaries about Hayter hiding Spanish refugees in the loft space of the studio. Hello. She would bring soup to feed these people who were hiding up there, but she made very clear that she didn't carry them in small containers, because if she was seen carrying large buckets of food, she would get in trouble. It was illegal to help or assist Spaniards in any way at that point. Oh, I should point out who this is. So Picasso's there. Can't see from here. Is that Maru? It's not 12. No, I don't think it is. And then Tanguy, and then Masson, John Butler Bright, Dalla Husband, and then Hayter at the far right. Hayter moved the studio to New York after fleeing Paris in 1939, September, as the war broke out. He was not the only artist who waited out the war in New York. Many of the European artists who had worked at the Atelier in Paris came to the New York shop. And into this international mix came Americans like Jackson Pollock, Louise Nevelson, Louise Bourgeois, David Smith, Robert Motherwell, and others. In addition to big-named artists, hundreds of less well-known artists passed through the studio, and some of these artists in turn established active university printmaking departments across the United States. The founding and expansion of these departments was the direct result of the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, commonly known as the GI Bill. It was signed into law by President Roosevelt and was meant to allow veterans and servicemen access to continued education, the ability to buy a home, and extended health benefits. One of its byproducts was expanding fields of study in universities to accommodate returning soldiers, including printmaking. So there were enlarged departments of printmaking that were expanded in techniques or just in size, notably at WashU in St. Louis, the University of Iowa, Yale University, and others that were led by Atelier 17 artists. And they remain powerhouse departments today. What's the #1 school for printmaking in the country?
What is it?
Some would say Wisconsin, medicine, I would say. Some would say it used to be Yale, but Iowa probably. Yeah. And because there were Atelier 17 artists there, it was crazy. They all went and changed everything. In addition, the Atelier was a model for professional workshops like Tamarind and Gemini and GDL and Universal Limited Art Editions and D.S. Marlowe and Pace and Periopi editions and all the others. They continue to thrive today. The Atelier in New York brought together an international and intergenerational group of artists in a place where creative minds innovated and experimented both conceptually and technically, with a profound emphasis on collaboration. They looked at history, philosophy, mathematical principles, physics and chemistry, time and space, materials, artistic practice. And Hayter was the lightning rod around whom artists investigated ideas, pedagogy, and technical innovations. Like he was the glue that held the whole enterprise together. In 1950, he went back home. He wrote, I've forgotten where, he wrote that he felt that America was not a good place for artists. And I think, although he never said it, it just dawned on me recently that he's probably referring to McCarthy and McCarthyism. Because, Hayter probably went to communism, if I had to guess. The New York Atelier, though, remained open for another 5 years, until 1955, under a sequence of directors, and this is telling: Carl Schrag, Terry Haas, Harry Hone, James Klieg, Peter Grippy, and Leo Katz. That's a lot of people in 5 years. Its failure in New York is often attributed to the charismatic Hayter's absence, that he wasn't there to keep watch over the shop. There's some shots of the New York Atelier. It was just packed with people. It's crazy. Hayter subscribed to the surrealist practice of automatic drawing, in which one would let images come unbidden from one's subconscious. He would draw and draw and draw and draw and draw to see which images would repeat themselves. Basically, he had piles of forms, and whichever pile was tallest, he thought that was the thing that represented a form that would be easily read by everybody. A Jungian archetype that we all would understand. Further, he believed that idea and technique were inseparable, as I said before. He wrote in 1949 that, how about this one? The separation frequently made between content and means of expression is arbitrary and can lead to error. That when the separation is complete, the idea remains without expression and the technique a sterile exercise. In books, essays, speeches, articles, he contended that art helps us understand our place in the world, as I said earlier, and that the workshop is a perfect place for inquiry. His 2 books, New Ways of Writing on the Far Left, that was published in 1949 first, and then revised and expanded in 1966 and 1981. This was 81, I think. And About Prince, the second one in, from 1962. Remain important references for working artists and historians alike. Who's got it on the shelf? Yeah, I knew it. And of course, those books inspired other artists that worked with Hayter to write their own. These are other technical guides by other artists that worked there. Julian Trevelyan, Gabriel Petterdy, Anthony Gross, who else is there? John Ludlam Wright, Ruth Leaf, and Krishna Reddy. In the decades after 1960, though, Hayter's emphasis on personal, emotional expression was out of step with contemporary art's new fascination with the external world. Pop art. In academia, the dominance of his ethos and style and pedagogy prompted something of a backlash. He fell out of favor. And it's only been in the last, I don't know, maybe 15 years that artists and historians have begun to reassess his work and its impact. Okay, we're going to turn to a little bit of Hayter's own work. Where are we? One of Hayter's aims in his prints was to expand the perception of the confines of a two-dimensional print. He wanted to demonstrate that intaglio prints could be seen not as simply flat images, but as dimensional surfaces like sculptural reliefs, which of course Atelier does perfectly, right? The ink lines and uninked marks he made with a scorper stand proud above the paper surface, and inspired by the wire sculptures of his friend and neighbor, Alexander Calder, Hayter, at this point, opens up his drawn forms, delineating their contours rather than describing their volume with shading. So he kind of gives away any interior of an object and just outlines it for you. The transparent solids are an essential feature of 6 prints that comprise this portfolio, Paysage Urbana from 1930. Each image depicts a Parisian street scene and a superimposed conflicting dreamscape on top of it. A surrealist nightmare, if you will. Or not even a nightmare, a dream. The locations are pretty much unchanged in Paris. Not much has changed since Haussmann got his hands on the city, right? So I've wandered around looking for all of the places, which was super fun. We found them. And took pictures, of course, couldn't help ourselves. And it helps us understand what's reality in these prints and what's not. So this one might be a little bit hard. There's a diagonal line that's coming from the upper right down to the midway left. And then there's a group of lines from the top left going down.
And those are an indication, I think, of a train or trolley situation going by, and it's a landscape that kind of floats on top of the building. He distinguished these two overlapping worlds through the physical nature of the lines. He used, for the concrete reality of Paris, dry point. And for the imaginary figures in the surrealist landscape on top, he used engraving. Now, it might seem counterintuitive, it did to me. I'm like, why would you do that? I see, not good. Yes. But I think, well, I was going to stop and tell anyone wanted to describe the difference between dry point. So this is a cross-section of a plate, just to help us understand what happens with dry point versus engraving. So with dry point, you have a very sharp tool and you're dragging, right? And with engraving, you're pushing. And it kicks up a different kind of groove in the plate. With dry point, you get these little sort of feathery burrs along the edge that can catch ink, and you get this feathery, inky line, versus engraving, which comes out super crisp and beautiful because it's got this very clear and open trough to sit in the ink. It seems so counterintuitive to me. It's so, I just don't know. But I think I figured it out. The inversion of expectation that we might associate with those two techniques, engraving as reproductive, as sure and strong, as architectural, as a guidepost, versus dry point. That's a technical term. that his inversion of them might be an indication of how he's feeling about the unsureness of life at this point on the continent, about making a point about the vital presence of subconscious forces that he's so interested in a world that may be just less substantial than you might think. Oh, this is the second one. I had all 6 in here, but I took part of them out to spare us a little time. This is another one which I love. This is the side of Père Lachaise in Paris, and he's rendered it right reading as he's drawing it, but in the end, of course, it mirrors it. But you can make out the tops of the mausoleums above that razor wire, and on the right, you can see they're still there. So he's added this, I assume, dead indigent person lying in this alley, all in dry point. And then this form that's over the top of this surrealist form is a hand. Everyone makes out the hand there, which I have come to think of as either, and who knows, the hand of God or whatever power you believe in, escorting this poor person's soul to wherever it's going to go, heaven or what have you. Or it could be the hand of the creator, just like artistic creativity in my mind. This hopefully helps you see those mausoleum tops on the right, super fuzzy, and the lines of the contour of the hand are much crisper and clearer until they run into a dry point, of course. Okay. In 1931, he created a portfolio called The Apocalypse, and it consisted of 6 prints and a poem by Georges Prunier. And the 6th plate, this one, I think pulls together a lot of his concerns. Dry point lines articulate a vertical totem, the indentations of which reveal it as the negative space inside your clenched fist, and the looping lines and engraving that sit on top suggest the forming hand. Does everybody see the hand there? The thumb? It's kind of hard to actually mimic. And Hunier, the poet who added a poem to the whole portfolio, in a sort of a turnabout, wrote to the images as opposed to the images being made to the poem. And he wrote of this plate, when the hand withdraws, nothing is left but the monument erected to its memory and to the void which has become a statue. So he's superimposing these two realities, and he's depicting a visual impossibility. He's got solidity describing the air inside your fist, and he's just using the engraving to describe a hand, but the hand is not whole either. It's a both and print, and I think, for my money, it's one of the best images of the early 20th century. You know, what's there, what's not, what's real, what isn't. Same idea with using the start point and the engraving, indicating two different levels of reality. There's a close-up of this engraved line that's so gorgeous. He did make, by the way, there are sculptures of this totem that he made with some clay or plaster or whatever, and they do exist. I think MoMA has one, and Mrs. Hager has one, of course. Look familiar? It's upstairs. Hayter's prints from the 40s and 50s mark a serious engagement with this problem of simultaneous color printing, meaning more inks in different colors on one plate at one time instead of multiple plates and multiple passes through the press. Previously, prints could be hand-colored afterward, or they could be printed a la poupée, where you would dot on bits of color in separate places so that nothing mixes. Or you could, most commonly, break them out into different plates. It's complicated, it's hard, the printers in the room know. What they figured out was that you could vary the level or amount of oil in each of the pigments, and they would reject each other, so you could have them next to each other and get it all through the press in one pass, which saved so much. He would, at first I think they were rolling colors on through a stencil, a regular piece of paper that was cut. Then they started doing something that they do here, which is screen printing each color onto the plate, the copper plate that had been inked already in black. The inking methods enabled him to create a huge body of work in these years, the 40s and the 50s, and most of them addressed issues of mythology and physical conflict. This is during the war and just after. The disruption and carnage of World War II and the horrific revelations of the Holocaust and the atomic bombs raised profound metaphysical and moral questions for numerous artists, including Hayter. And many of the color prints from this time address human conflict and despair, and in one case, personal tragedy. Saint Personnage is from 1946. It's considered Hayter's most important composition, as well as a landmark in the history of printmaking. It represents Hayter's iconic style at its peak. It makes use of his most celebrated techniques, automatist engraving, soft ground etching for tones and textures, on-image embossings, and the first successful large-scale use of simultaneous color printing. He used the term simultaneous color printing instead of viscosity printing because in his mind, every ink has a viscosity. So it's sort of not really descriptive or helpful. This print is super personal. It's a memorial to his son David, who died of tuberculosis at age 16. Following his parents' divorce in 1929, David had lived with his mother for his entire life until the last few months of his life when he came to stay with Hayter right before he died. And I have some treats for you. I thought it might be interesting for you to see how it's put together. This is state one line, the automatist engraved line. And you can make out the and then we found an impression at Helen Maxwell brought sent me this image where he's added the soft ground to create the tones, the tonal values. And then there are some proofs at the museum, the British Museum in London. It was a partial sale to them in 1988, and it's 200-some prints, which is, they're wonderful to pull out. And I love this, the one on the left, it's just like, let me see what that bird looks like. I'm just getting that. And oh, let's see what half of the orange looks like. And then on the right, you see all three of the colors with no black ink at all. And I think he's trying to figure out what the overlay of the colors is going to do on the plate. Is my tertiary colors, are they going to produce blue for me in that top triangle? Well, yes, they are. He loves stuff like that. Don't forget, he was a scientist and a chemist. These are two impressions that I purchased for the BMA's collection when I was there, looking at the orange and magenta Atelier, and then a single green one. And here they are together, one soft ground colors, all pretty up forward. Okay. In the late 50s, Hayter's work underwent a radical change to put down the urine. For what reason, we don't know. He created a group of prints that focus on actual phenomena without using conventional lines or illustrative mark making. And they might look totally abstract to you, but Hayter never accepts pure abstraction as a valid subject. He always roots things in the here and now by the titles. So this one, Cascades, rushing water. And it's rushing water, and it's a stream that is, he buys behind the house he buys in the south of France after the war. And there's lots of work by Hayter that features running water. I think as a scientist, he's obsessed with trying to figure out how to depict in a still two-dimensional image the movement of water and waves and motion. It's crazy. This one we bought for the BMA in, I don't know, 2007 maybe, and I became obsessed with it. I wanted to know how in the world he did it. And for those of you who have done simultaneous color printing, you know exactly how it's done, but I'm going to help everyone else understand it. So sit back and relax. This is the plate, the zinc plate on the left, which Mrs. Hayter gave to the museum when I was working on a show on here, which is great. And then an impression that shows you what it looks like when it's inked in intaglio, meaning there are no grooves really. But the black ink is clinging to the shapes that were created with the resist that he was spraying onto the plate. What I love about them, this print in particular, is that he's trying to give you the image of rushing water, but he's not drawing it for you. He's not drawing the stream. He's using the resist liquid in a cascade to create the image. So it's what I would call an indexable print. It's made out of what it is. That makes sense? So here's what happens. This is a cross-section of a plate. We've started calling them the plateau is the top. Canyon floor is the open bite areas that have been bitten down. And then the canyon walls are where the black ink is clinging. When you intaglio wipe it, clings, as I said, some of it will sit in the bottom of the canyon floor where the open bite areas are. And then they're adding this pink-blue gradient on a soft roller that can reach down into those open bite areas. And then lastly, they're rolling across the top with the green. Make sense? Okay. So we had to make some. This was a bunch of years ago, maybe 2014 or something. This is my driveway. So this is one of the plates that we made, inked in intaglio and printed with the black. And here's the preparation of the blue-pink-blue gradient, and it got rolled onto the surface and down into the open bit areas. This is that plate inked, and that's the proof we pulled. You see it sits on the surface. It'll get covered by the green, mostly. And for the green, there's lots of splotchy yellow that kind of appears, and it took a while for us to figure out what was going on. This is the best we could come up with. We rolled out the green on a glass palette and dropped some yellow and didn't let it really go anywhere. Picked it up, offset it on a roller, and then rolled it across the plate. Big lots of nods from you, I like it. So this is the inked up plate, and that's one of the proofs we pulled. Obviously not the same one. So here's Hayter's print on the left, and 3 of the proofs we pulled on our baby here. And you see how different the yellows, where they're hitting, where they're landing. If you went and found all of the various impressions of Cascade, you would find the same thing. He didn't care. He just loved to experiment. And this was editioned by Hector Saunier, who was the master printer who did all of his last editions and who directed the Atelier after Hayter died, who died 2 weeks ago, actually himself, who probably tried to keep it all in line and the same, but I think Hayter probably was like, stop. So these drippy ones, I think are so cool. The automatic drawing has really disappeared. He's using these devices set in motion by his hand, but not drawn by his hand, that sprayed all of this stuff. So he's making these wonderful and textile prints. I think they're so cool. He's exploiting physical forces, material properties, and he's actively creating and not just embodying content. He's ahead of his time. One can see him searching for a balance between physics, to which humans are irrelevant, psyche, deeply human, but largely out of our control, and technical mastery, which is the limited apex of his total control, right? Because he's a wizard. For Hayter, the uncontrollable force was not just a pretty effect, but also for him an emblem of humankind's inability to stop time. I think it's informative, sorry, trigger finger. I think it's informative to know how it's worked, because they're hard to, if you don't know, it's confounding, and it can be super difficult, I think, and I think pulling it apart is helpful. You can tell me later if it wasn't. So for many artists, the Atelier 17 in New York was transformative. It was a place where ideas and themes and even shapes were common currency. All of those sort of ovoids and shapes that you find upstairs, everybody was doing it. A core group went on to transform the role of printmaking in American education, establishing workshops in university departments across the country, and through the manuals they published, subsequent generations have carried on the legacy of Atelier 17 and its belief in making as a source of ideas, not just an expression of them. Its pursuit of formal and technical innovation and its communal ideal. Like there was a lot to it, and people just think it's about, viscosity printing. It's so Hayter and Atelier 17 have long been acknowledged as critical forces in the revitalization of printmaking in Europe and the United States in the mid-century. And through his influence, he's further been recognized as an agent of change in modern and contemporary art more broadly. And I'll show you an example in a second. His belief in the fearless confrontation between artist and material, whether on copper or canvas, was fundamental to abstract expressionism and his fostering of a collaborative working environment and of indirect and counterintuitive processes created a space that lots of people have chosen to occupy since then. Hundreds of artists went through the Atelier in Paris and in New York. The roster of artists was codified and solidified by Joanne Moser back in 1976 when she was writing her dissertation. And that's the list that everyone has been working on for that long, if you can believe it, 50 years. My colleague, Christina Weil, and I have embarked on a new project called the Atelier 17 Project. This is a screenshot of our new website. We are working with a few other people toward the Atelier's 100th birthday in 2027. And part of that is updating that early roster. So Christina's tireless. She told me recently she's added like 300 names to the list, which is incredible. So we're looking to museums to mount exhibitions and for people to write about Atelier, do new research, and a host of other things, and we welcome your ideas. Hint, hint. Politics not my favorite, but I think it's instructive to mention that everyone thinks he's, some apex of the top of the pile genius or something working alone. Don't think so. He was at the Atelier in 1944 and 1945, and he made, I think, 7 plates there. And they're not great. They're kind of weird, and he only pulled 2 of each. He kept one in his collection, and the other went to MoMA. And years later, in 1967, Lee Krasner found the plates, uncovered them, and had them cleaned up by Gabriel Petterdial, and they printed an edition. So you can find them everywhere, but you can bet that they are from the later printing. FYI. There are things that I think that Pollock learned from Hayter. One is when you're engraving on a copper plate, the plate is sitting on a little sort of bean bag, and you turn the plate into the burin because it's tough to push, right? And so you end up looking at the plate from all angles and flat. Also, Hayter is a painter, and he always worked flat on the floor. And I don't know that some people have highly suggested it. I don't think anyone's going to lay their life on the line on it. pretty sure Pollock learned, we know he learned stuff from Lee Krasner, his wife, right? She was 10 years ahead of him in her practice. I think Hayter had it in fact too. This is a recent installation in 2016 at 15 at MoMA of all of their Pollock plates, including a couple of print plates, which is kind of sweet. Always love the plates. Okay, I wanted to show you a couple of artists that were associated with Hayter who can show us clearly that transition from pre-war angst to immediately post-war angst to the future. So Hayter was from Hungary. He immigrated to the States in '39. He taught at a bunch of institutions, but the longest tenure was at Yale. He was responsible for bringing Yale's printmaking department into what it has become. And he taught thousands and thousands of people, of course. In '39, he's in Paris, and he's interested in what's going on in Spain, as they all are at this point, and he does this beautiful portfolio called the Black Bowl, which this is one of the plates. And you can see the nods to Picasso. You can see that the bowl, the Spanish bowl, is the Republic, or the other way around, I can't remember. And he also does this incredible series of self-portraits. This is the most angst-ridden one. I think it speaks for itself, honestly. And this is one that got away. I always wanted to acquire this for the museum, and I didn't get to it. It always looks to me like Christ on the cross, the dead soldier in Germany, and I think, I hate it when titles have to be read to make something make sense, but still, like, Germany just kills me. Ha. But pretty soon thereafter, by the early 50s, Hayter turns towards vegetation and life and renewal as his subject matter. It's all landscape, very modernist landscape, but landscape nonetheless. I think that's one of the clearest examples we have. Right. This is upstairs. I don't know if you guys all saw this one. It's a fantastic print. This is Fred Becker. Fred Becker is, he was the one who took Wash U's printmaking department and turned it into what it was. He was there for 20 years. And then he moved to UMass Amherst and did the same thing there until he retired. I think that this one, the kaleidoscopic organism, it's a turning point for him, and it's to me, there's so much going on that I took the time one day to really stop and try and figure out what in the world was going on. Interestingly, he's making this at the same time as Hayter's making the same personage, and they're both really large plates in both of their oeuvres. And in addition, Becker helped Hayter print the edition of Saint Personage. So everybody's in the mix. Both of them are abstractions of teeming humanity and personal tumult, and others are, they're grappling with all of the trauma from the war. Becker's print is less abstract than Hayter's, but I think its meaning is actually more opaque. So I'm going to pull it apart for you. This is how the curator thinks. You're coming into my brain. And please know, this is only my thinking. There's no guarantee this is what he was thinking, but this also goes to show you can't control what people bring to your art. He was the shop tech and printer at Atelier 17 in the 40s before he left for St. Louis, and he made this when he was still at the Atelier in New York. It is big, it's 17 by 14-ish. It's wacky. It's this crazy amoeba-like shape that reveals its innards. The innards are being held open by those discs. And within the mass's interior, there's a close-up, we find from the bottom up a balustrade or a railing that is being built or repaired. This is all questionable. A casement window handle, a keyhole holding the center of the beam, but there's something going through it, don't know what. Assorted architectural wire forms surmounted by what I see as a praying mantis. Oops, hold on. We'll get to that in a second. So the praying mantis is a shared form that the surrealists really embraced, and if you know anything about praying mantises, you know why. They killed their mates after copulation. the females. I was reviewing stuff today and I reread an article that reminded me that Breton and a bunch of the other artists had aquariums or terrariums, and they raised praying mantises. Like, they were obsessed. Obsessed. Yeah. They're cool forms. They look very human. They look like they're praying. It's it's a thing, right? But they are in this whole female and eating the male. Plus they're known to attack other insects. They're stand-ins for male fears about powerful women, shall we say. And I think what we've got here is what they call vagina dentata. How do you guess that? Reflecting myths about fierce lady bits, right? And male castration fears. And Becker's form is not truth like hairs series, right in the middle there. But I think the head of the praying mantis at the apex of this gaping thing, I just don't leave it there. But we must look at the bulk of the organism itself, right? At the bottom, we find 2 feet finally, after we've gone through this whole innards thing. One foot has a shoe so worn that the big toe is popping out of it. And until this moment, I could have believed that we were dealing with a microscopic look at teeming life or celestial Big Bang in process. But then the feet just snaps you right back to reality and our visible world. So here's some of the questions I asked myself. Is the background radiating to highlight the subject, or is it a vortex that you're falling into? Are the discs that hold open the form, are they holding it, or are they running around the edge? Are they swirling like wheels, or symbolizing something else? Sometimes I see eyes, lemon slices, stained glass windows, military medals of honor, kaleidoscopic hearts. Could they be railway cars and shower heads? The interior elements are structural, man-made, and mechanistic, even the mantis. And they're linked together in this Rube Goldbergian sort of contraption. And I find it curious that those discs that are holding it open, they read organic to me, as opposed to everything that's inside this mechanistic. And the feet read either as comical, hobo, circus clown, or as deadly serious, a wounded dead soldier. And of course, you can't overlook the title, kaleidoscopic organism, but I don't think it really helps, honestly. And so here's where I ended up. The title and the aforementioned definition of kaleidoscope, which is a thing that has constantly generating symmetrical patterns from small pieces of colored glass, and its symbol is basically things that change constantly. It always brings me back to World War II and its aftermath. And at first glance, the prints made in 1946, the year after the war ended, it looks nearly comical. Those gargantuan feet, the toe poking out of the shoe, the whirligigs, the dealy bombers. What a smart way to pull us in. But then, the praying mantis at its core turns dark for me. The radiant, glowing halo turns into a vortex. The feet become those of a dead soldier. The organisms fold into forms, open, reveal man's mechanistic world symbolizing war, its machines, and their enabling of unbelievable cruelty and death. I suppose contemporaneous viewers might have read this differently. I'll never know. But I believe it's imperative that we know and learn from history, right? It also serves to remind us that when you're looking at a work of art, it must be considered in context, since artists can never be disassociated from the time in which they're working. So, 1946 to me says it all, right? I made a sort of a tip with Becker's daughter. She thinks her father was doodling while he was. I was like, I don't think so, Carla. But we'll never agree. But for fun, I just wanted to show you some other praying mantises in art. This one, this is one of the earlier images that you might find of the praying mantis from Escher. Who knows who would have seen it at that point. But amongst the crew that was working with Becker, here's one of Hayter, Cruelty of Insects, the bad one. Here's one from Roderick Mead, who was a New Mexico artist who was at the Atelier in New York. Werner Drevis was an immigrant from Germany during the war. Clinton Blair King, I could never find anything about him. And then, curiously, Helen Phillips, an American sculptor who prints at Hayter's workshop beginning in 1936. She was in Paris. By the way, she and Hayter were married from 1940 to 1972. She's a sculptor. And for her, the prints inform sculpture, the sculpture informs the prints. But she's a perfect example of that kind of work. Her prints and sculptures share forms, shapes, feelings. And here, I can't really make out the praying mantises, but she's named it that, so we have to assume it's there. I'm a bit shocked to find a woman doing a praying mantis. And in fact, when I was reading up this morning, one of the scholars stated that she had never found a woman surrealist artist doing praying mantises. I wonder if it's maybe a turnout reclaiming of power. I don't know. That's the fun part about this stuff. Don't conjecture. Making it up as I go along. And then I just wanted to leave Fred Becker with a later work from 1951. He's turned from all of this weird mechanistic war thing to jazz music. He loved jazz music. Before the war, he spent time in all of these jazz clubs in New York doing caricatures for people, making money that way. And the one on the right is this crazy a la coupe, selective white man, I guess. I don't know, what do you call that, Bill? A la coupe, a la coupe inking, same plate. Ron had this plate at the IFPDA fair a few years back, and it was just stunning, so incredible. And then I wanted to quickly look at Sue Fuller. We have some Sue Fuller upstairs. This is the person who forwarded soft ground etching in a really big way. She's using lace, as you see, and also string to create the images of these female forms. And she also very handily creates collages, which I think really helps us understand how you would manipulate the string to affect the image. And then here's a first impression, first state, where she's just done the line work. By the way, if you like Sue Fuller, Susan Teller is the person to go to. She knew Sue Fuller very well and has a deep relationship with her family and the estate. So if you're into her, that's where you go. And then lastly, I could not throw it. And then she starts going really abstract and makes these really wonderful string constructions. This is 1956. This is actual string, it's not a work on paper. There's nails and string going on, but she just takes the string and runs with it, which I think there's a lot of these around. They're so cool. And then we'll have to wrap up with Baskin. So the one upstairs is Man of Peace, right? For my taste, the Hydrogen Man does it better and does it all. But just to show you that he's doing this in 54, so he's holding on to the onyx longer than many of the artists did, and I think he deeply felt it for his entire career. But he does move on a little bit, not very much later, 57, and he starts doing block book illustrations. And he kind of leaves the onyx behind him. This one is also life size. The Hydrogen Man. It's a heart stopper. All right, so here's our conclusion. Amidst the pervasive sense of uncertainty, there was also a concurrent celebration of progress and innovation, but I don't really see that in these artists yet. I mean, I didn't take them into the 60s. I felt like we should stay within the 50s. It seems like, and maybe because of the Atelier's link to surrealism, they hold on to those sorts of deep, dark, let's learn how we think, fierce sorts of theories that are coming out of Young and whoever else. I think that the sort of modernity, futurism, and utopianism thing comes through mainly in design and furniture and things that are upstairs. I feel like even the space race, which is a cause for artists to dream about what life could be like out in the outer sphere, isn't hitting these artists particularly. There's one print upstairs that's about the galaxy. I feel like art and design from the atomic age, it's deeply reflective of the complex social, political, and technological forces at play during this really transformational and transformative period in history. And artists, as they should, grappled with existential anxieties and celebrated the promise of progress and innovation when they could. They explored the mysteries of the cosmos and confronted the pervasive influence of consumer culture eventually. Through their creative expressions, they capture a spirit of an era, defined by both fear and fascination, uncertainty and optimism, good versus evil, and go on. And I feel like it's a wonderful microcosm to look at. Artists are able to reflect and react to world events in ways that we are not. My reaction just stays in my brain. I might write something down, maybe. But artists they're exploring it out in visual form. And I think we can always learn something from the artists who work in this way. Okay, I'm going to finish up with some interesting and important information. Just to mention that I do host a podcast called Platemark, which is all about prints and the printmaking ecosystem. Two of my former guests are sitting in the audience, and it's fun. We also have a history of prints series on it, so if you want to go all the way back to Durer or Rembrandt, we did 3 episodes on Rembrandt, and we just recorded 2.5 hours on the Enlightenment. So yeah. But I think it's a service to the ecosystem. Everybody needs and wants a platform to share who they are and what their work is about. I love talking to the artists, of course. My favorite is talking to the printers. I just love talking to printers. Because they're like, you guys are the nexus, right? Like, the artist doesn't see the sausage grinder and how it's making the sausage. And the printers have the stories. And that's my favorite thing. So give Platemark a listen. Don't forget to grab your Platemark pencils on the way out. Also, the Baltimore Fine Art Print Fair is a new print fair that we started in 2022. We are switching places with the IPDA fair. We're moving to the fall from the spring because they moved to the spring. We're not going to go at somebody's request in the election year. We're going to wait till 2025. So look for us there. The Atelier 17 project is new. If you have anything to add, if you worked with somebody who worked with Hayter, let us know. We want to trace the family tree. And also mention my blog, which is kind of dormant at the moment, but there's some cool and fun entries in there, including one on the collect stuff with organism. And those are all the useful links. All right, that's all I have to say. Are there questions from the audience? Anybody? Yes?
So I went to this year with the University of Iowa, so it'd be interesting to hear about that. Like the idea of the whole MFA idea exploding, and all these people learning printmaking through universities versus like a Atelier versus a workshop.
It's interesting. It seems like every couple of generations the model totally changes. So in this Enlightenment episode we were just doing, we're talking about the switch from the 7-year apprenticeship in some one-person, one-man's studio to the academy system in France and England and everywhere else, that it becomes a school. And I think it's the same thing that's happening now. Like it's less about these smaller studios and more about the MFA programs. And I think that's still true today, although I don't have an MFA. Maybe you could answer that better than I can. Lazansky's amazing. Was he there and talking to you when you were there?
No.
Okay. I've heard that. But he is an incredible artist, and I had him in a slideshow, and then I took him out for time. I'm sorry. Beautiful work, gorgeous work, and fearless about. I don't know if you ever saw his Nazi drawings. There's 20 of them. They're huge, hard to show. Much later than the war, like he was thinking hard about all of that stuff for a very long time. And I appreciate that. His children, one of his children is teaching at Bucknell, I think, so they're around. Did that answer your question? Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
Yeah, similar question. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, you opened with kind of talking about how printmaking is overlooked in the art world. And then you mentioned how Hayter, kind of got dismissed later because the art world was going in a different direction. And then a lot of his pupils went off to these universities to start these university programs. And then, so now people either study with one of these people or study with someone who studied with one of these people. So it's like on down and down, and you can trace the lineage. Do you think that part of it, that has made printmaking go on a slightly different trajectory than the art world because of that academic outgrowth of Hayter, or not? I don't know.
Yeah, yes, I think you're right. There's a lot of reasons why prints are so specialized. It takes a lot of patience to get in, it takes a lot of knowledge, and you gotta be committed to it. And I think because we have a very minutia-esque shared vocabulary, particularly the old master people, cataloging old master stuff is no easy walk in the park, it's a pain. But we all understand what the sources are, and we talk and speak the same language and do the same print I have. I think because of all of that, we have slid into our own corner, and it would be good if we could somehow open outward. And I think that, having painters and sculptors come in and work with you guys in the shops is really important. It'll, Julie Marti was bringing attention to Gemini, of course, because she's doing all those wonderful things. That's critical. I think that's part of what I'm doing at Platemark, is to try and draw back that curtain and demystify the scary parts of it. We're all people, and we all just happen to have cool jobs and have a lot of knowledge, like I'm just, but I think you're right. It's both the fun part, because we all have a cool kids club that no one else is paying attention to, but at the same time we need to open out. I don't know, do you guys agree? Phil has a thought.
I feel like all the artists know, because they all work in print or want to look for that collaborative aspect, because they don't get feedback of any kind in their own studio system. They don't get it from their galleries, and they really don't get it from their collectors. Not anything that's going to push them creatively. I think, when you hear about Hayter, like Bob Blacker, what they were so good at was being critical for helping an artist experiment, feel supported, but also get real feedback from a contemporary versus someone from outside the bubble. So print workshops are always that place where artists feel most welcome to be themselves and to experiment and to not be judged. And I think, some part of the printmakers want to keep the sanctity of that world, so it keeps some of that out, or they spread some of that out at the same time.
Right. Most of the print shops are by invitation at this point, and conventional wisdom and suggestion to most artists is get yourself a show first, have somebody write about it. I think it's a long haul. Smaller shops are perfect for working with people who are just getting their, everything rolling, and it's important, of course, for the big shops to keep working with the big boys and women. Right, Kevin?
I have a random other question.
Sure.
Background of one of the photos from New York.
Is Black in there?
No, there's a litho press.
Oh yeah, they did speak.
And it's never talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I never knew they had it.
They did. I don't think they did screen, except for screening the color. But they definitely were experimenting with other things. I think there were probably a certain artist who came in and said, "Hey, we should bring in a litho press. Let's see if we can squeeze it in or something." But yeah, they were doing relief. They were doing litho.
Did you never see anything but the intaglio prints? It's like, it's not really talked about with Hayter.
Yeah. Oh, it's true.
So that's why I was kind of curious, because he's literally standing next to it. So it's, this is kind of back there.
Yeah. No, that's true. There's one litho in the show, I noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Nobody really has dug into that part, honestly, in the literature. It's a good question.
Just because there's such a cultural person not around Hayter, and he was so focused on Atelier.
He was.
And that's where all of that information was happening.
But he did, I think he did a couple of lithographs early, maybe. I'll look at the catalog. Very fascinating. And then later he did a set of screen prints for some gallery. So that he does branch off occasionally. And of course he had a painting studio his entire career. He made tons of paintings, all of which look like the prints. I think he's a better printmaker, honestly. Some of the paintings are beautiful, but for the most part, all I can see are the prints that the paintings that came out of. So it's kind of a reversal. All right, who else? That's it? All right. Thanks for, sorry I went so long. Thanks for staying, everybody.